taking one last look, sir, at my friends.
Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is the last entry in the Star Wars saga and attempts to conclude a storyline set up 42 years ago. Being the last entry in the saga, you might expect the film to answer long-term lingering questions, but there's still a lot that the film doesn't tell you. So we're here today to cover the 10 most crucial points of The Rise of Skywalker that the movie doesn't tell you. Just a warning that if you haven't seen Rise of Skywalker yet, this video will contain spoilers, so click away if you don't want the movie spoiled.
We're all in this. Till the end.
Starting off at number 10, the film opens with Kylo Ren searching for something called a Sith Wayfinder, a device to lead him to Emperor Palpatine on Exegol. What the film doesn't tell you, however, is that the Wayfinder is located on the formerly volcanic planet of Mustafar, the same planet where Anakin and Obi-Wan duel in Revenge of the Sith, and where Vader's castle is located, as seen in Rogue One. And the troops Kylo Ren fights on the planet Mustafar are cultists obsessed with Darth Vader, who settled on the planet to study and protect Vader's heritage. Seeing that the planet looks very different from the volcanic world we've seen in previous films, it's understandable that very few viewers would have been able to discern this without the visual dictionary. The change of Mustafar's appearance is actually explained in the Star Wars VR game Vader Immortal, which covers Vader's desire to use an ancient device to bring Padme back to life. According to Vader Immortal, Mustafar was actually once a lush and vibrant world long ago. The change of the planet is a result of a Force user named Lady Corvax, a woman who was obsessed with learning the secrets of resurrection. Corvax attempted a ritual on the planet Mustafar to bring her dead husband back to life. However, the use of this device created a wound in the Force which scarred the planet, transforming it from a world of life into a place of death. In the time leading up to Rogue One, the Vader Immortal VR game sees Lord Vader attempt to use this device to bring back Padme. The device is destroyed, however, thwarting Vader's attempts, and this act appeases the Force and begins the process of healing to the planet Mustafar. In The Rise of Skywalker, we see that the lava has cooled and iron trees have begun to grow on the formerly volcanic planet, showing us that the healing process begun in Vader Immortal is now fully underway.
Go to the Mustafar system. Wipe out Viceroy Gunray.
Palpatine's return is established directly in the opening crawl of the film, without any true explanation of how he returned, other than the cryptic, "The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural." While this is simply playing out the idea that falling off things doesn't really kill you in Star Wars, our understanding of Palpatine's return is really better explained by an understanding of Star Wars legends. In Legends, Palpatine was unable to learn his master's secrets to cheat death, instead deciding to preserve his spirit after death and to transfer it into one of the many clones that he had made of himself. However, Palpatine's decrepit body in the film suggests that this is not the case in canon. This is actually more reminiscent of the Legends Dark Lord Darth Sion from the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. Darth Sion fed the dark side with his hatred and pain to keep him alive. We know that this is possible in canon, as it is the exact same method that Maul used to keep himself alive after his defeat at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Naboo, telling us that it's most likely that Sidious was able to preserve his life through his hatred and pain, keeping his old and decrepit body alive long enough to try to find a new host.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
Even you, Master of the Knights of Ren, have never faced such a test.
The Knights of Ren have been a subject of much speculation ever since their first mention in The Force Awakens. Being a new faction without much screen time or explanation, most fans were curious to know more about this clandestine army. The Rise of Skywalker is the first time we've gotten to truly see them in action, but the movie still doesn't tell us anything about who they are or what they do. Fortunately, we recently got the release of the Marvel comic Rise of Kylo Ren, which helps to tell us a little bit more about the Knights' history and role. In the comic, we learn that the Knights actually predate Kylo Ren's fall to the dark side, and have existed as a faction long before the fallen Ben Solo became their leader. We know that this group serves an enigmatic master, likely Palpatine himself, or perhaps ruled indirectly by Palpatine through Snoke. The group may have even been founded with the hidden purpose of providing Ben Solo a dark side alternative to his uncle's Jedi Order. However, the visual dictionary confirms the Knights of Ren have existed for centuries and hail from the unknown regions, a territory largely separate from the events of galactic history as we know them in Star Wars, telling us that this group likely evolved separate from both the Jedi and the Sith, and merely play an auxiliary role in the events of the current war. We still don't know everything we'd like to know about them, but we will be covering that here on the channel as we get more comics released.
He had sensed my power, as he senses yours.
Speaking of the Kylo Ren comic, the issue also gives us a full account of the destruction of Luke's Jedi Temple. While most of the events are things we've seen in glimpses before, there is one key element that was not covered by any of the films, and that fact is that Ben Solo was not responsible for the temple's burning. In the comic, we see Ben immediately following his confrontation with Luke, and after leaving his tent, Ben looks to the temple just in time to see it burst into flames. When Ben sees the burning, he says, "I never wanted this," and a voice speaks to him, telling him that the Jedi are responsible for their own destruction. We can reasonably assume that this was the voice of the one who destroyed the temple. And one thing Rise of Skywalker does tell us is that it has been Palpatine's voice speaking to Ben throughout all these years, telling us it was likely Darth Sidious himself who destroyed the temple through the power of the Force, all the way from the unknown regions.
Are you alright? I heard there was an attack on the Jedi Temple. You can see the smoke from here.
Lord Malak, the preparations are nearly complete. Every day the Star Forge adds more ships to our fleet. It is operating at nearly 300% of our projections. The fleet is assembling around the Star Forge and awaits your instructions.
Palpatine is now in the command of a massive Sith fleet of Star Destroyers. However, the movie never tells us where these ships come from. It's clear that Sidious has manipulated the events of the film so far, and this manipulation likely played a major role in the creation of this fleet. We know that Palpatine had several contingency plans for the event of his death, and that he used the First Order to set the stage for his return. However, I think it's important to remember that not all former Imperials were instructed or even allowed to take part in the First Order. Palpatine had several other plans in place, and the Final Order was clearly the center point of his plans. Manipulating events on a galactic scale with the manpower of the Imperial remnant would certainly be enough to justify the creation of such a fleet. And the visual dictionary states that Sith loyalists have been on Exegol, continuing the production of Star Destroyers ever since the Galactic Civil War. Either that, or the film has officially canonized the Star Forge.
Take a few moments to get the coordinates from the Navi computer.
Are you kidding? At the rate they're gaining?
In the beginning of the film, Poe Dameron escapes in the Millennium Falcon using a technique called Hyperspace Skipping, but the film doesn't really tell us what it is. Hyperspace Skipping is a technique used to escape a situation before hyperspace coordinates can be calculated. Because the ship jumps to light speed blindly in whatever direction it was facing, it requires the pilot to pull out of hyperspace almost immediately to avoid a fatal collision while in light speed. The event is repeated until either the light speed skippers escape their predicament or crash into something unforeseen.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it end your trip real quick, wouldn't you?
Ah, good. Supremely...
With Snoke's anticlimactic demise in The Last Jedi, we all had to wonder what role he was actually playing in Palpatine's master plan. We see in Palpatine's palace on Exegol that there are cloning tubes where Palpatine is growing Snokes, as he tells us that he was responsible for Snoke's existence. Even though this answers where Snoke comes from, it doesn't really tell us his purpose in any of this. Snoke's role can really only be inferred, and again, by reading the Rise of Kylo Ren comic. Even though the Kylo we see in the films is ready to take direction from Vader's old master, it is unlikely that a young Ben Solo would have been open to his uncle's old enemy and heeded the temptations of Palpatine. Unable to woo Ben Solo himself as he had done with Anakin, Palpatine likely created Snoke as a powerful but victimized figure to comfort Ben Solo and provide him with a place of safety beyond his family.
If you see our son, bring him home.
The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is 42.
On the desert planet listed as Luke's last coordinates, the team arrives in time for the Aki-Aki Festival of the Ancestors, a massive celebration that occurs once every 42 years. No, this number is not a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or at least that's not all it is, but it's actually an Easter egg referencing the number of years in our world between the release of A New Hope and the release of Rise of Skywalker, a saga 42 years in the making.
Savior, conqueror, hero, villain. You are all things, Revan, and yet you are nothing.
Red Stormtroopers are actually called Sith Troopers and are divided up by battalions named after great Sith Lords from the past. These battalions are not named in the film, but their names are referenced in the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary, canonizing many legend Sith Lords, but most notably Darth Revan and Darth Tenebrous. Darth Revan was a Dark Lord of the Sith, formerly a Jedi who fought in the Mandalorian Wars, and was seemingly turned to the dark side as a galactic conqueror. In Legends, he was redeemed to the light side, and while none of these events are canonized by his existence, it is nice to know that he has finally been canonized as an official member of galactic history. Darth Tenebrous, on the other hand, was in Legends a Sith Bith, that's fun to say, who was formerly the master of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Even though this officially canonizes characters like Revan, it still doesn't canonize their stories. Similar to how Grand Admiral Thrawn was canonized but his story changed, this may hint that we may be getting a new story about the great Sith and Jedi, Revan.
Only I've been both Jedi and Sith, and found clarity in the Force.
No, my father didn't fight in the wars. He was a navigator on a spice freighter.
That's what your uncle told you.
When going to find Babu Frick, it is revealed that Poe Dameron's history before joining the Resistance was as a spice runner. While the film doesn't tell you what spice is, Star Wars fans will no doubt know that spice is a euphemism in Star Wars for illicit narcotics and drugs, telling us that Poe Dameron's history was in fact as a drug smuggler and possibly dealer. The team takes appropriate offense at this, which again only makes sense if you know what the term spice actually means in Star Wars. In fact, the team takes a lot more appropriate offense at this than Luke did at having been told that that's what his father was. Apparently, Owen and Beru thought that telling their nephew that his father dealt drugs was better than telling him that he was actually a Jedi Knight.